so we can afford to conduct our business and our affairs. And I thought if we take a minute just to go around and introduce each other and ourselves, and maybe say a few words about what you hope to accomplish here, just in terms of your participation. And so perhaps I can start with you.
I will be happy to start. So my name is Frank Edelblue. I'm the Commissioner of Education for the state of New Hampshire. And my goal is to support all of you in successfully executing this statute and coming up with a great product.
Well, my name is Bill Gardner. I'm familiar with 5 of these, going back to the mid-70s, and all of them have had a strong desire to try to accomplish something, but unfortunately, we're worse off today than we were back then. And it's amazing to have to say that, but and each one kind of took an approach that was similar, but planned to do it better than the one before. And so my idea is that we look at some things that have not been done before, at least look at them, and take the best of what has happened and maybe come up with, I'm going to give you examples. The one that I was involved in had to do with the National Association of Secretaries of State. It was when I was the president in 1998 and 1999. And there were, among the states, there was a lot of concern that people weren't participating as much. People weren't even running for office as much. There was a limitation on that. And so we came up with the idea that we would poll young people. And we took $100,000 and we set up a committee. I asked Robert Putnam if he would head this up for us. He was working on writing his book, Bowling Alone, at that time. And he agreed to do it. And so we got the American Political Science Association Civics Committee that was headed by Richard Neame from the University of Rochester, who had headed that committee for a number of years, and secondary school team. We had a lot of organizations that came in to help us. And Putnam led us to do a national poll. And he had all these groups involved, and he was particularly interested in taking some of the questions that focused on what young people were thinking during those years, between 17 and 25. And he talked about the first polling outfit. It was Roper, connected with Cornell. They started polling in the late 1940s. And they had a question asking young people, when you meet someone for the first time, do you tend to be trusting or skeptical? And just about 75% in every single poll from the late 40s through the 50s, through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s, and up through the mid-90s. Every poll that was done that asked that same question. And it's important that you use the exact same words. You don't change a word here and there, you keep it. And Putnam made sure that we did that. So we hired 2 top, one Republican and one Democratic polling firm. We put $100,000 into it, and then we had focus groups afterwards. But the most significant thing that we found, and that Putnam later talked a lot about throughout the country when he was working on his book Bowling Alone, was that question. Because our poll in '99 was the first one that 75% of the young people said they were skeptical. A huge change over almost a half a century. So the concern was whether it was an outlier, but every single poll since then, up for the next 6 or 8 years, and I haven't followed it after that, it's had the same thing. So that's a fundamental change among the youth of America. If you don't trust people, and we were concerned enough about it to have these focus groups. So we had them on the East Coast, the Midwest, the West, and probed them about, you know, does this mean that you don't really want to leave the world a better place than it was when you got here? No, no, no. So does this mean that you really don't want to help other people because you don't trust anyone anymore? No, no. But what we found was that they didn't want to do it in groups. They wanted to do it individually. They wanted to make it a better place, but they wanted to do it one-on-one mentoring. They didn't want to join a club. They didn't want anything to do with organizations, and government was one of the organizations. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we
Thank you, Bill.
begin this, because if we fully understand what the change is, things from the past are not going to be as effective. And that's why the look.
Thank you, Bill, for that background and insight. I look forward to working with you on these issues.
Boy, oh, but it's hard to come after a man like this.
That's right, it is. Impossible.
Mr. Gardner, I respect you in every way. My name is Rick Ladd. I hail from Haverhill, New Hampshire, and I chair education here in the state in the House of Representatives. I've been there 16 years, and I reflect back on when I was a school principal and teacher, and then later an administrator up in Alaska. But I reflect back on what I did in Maine. The Maine Studies Curriculum Project. We saw back then, we had a problem. This is back in 1974, 75, right up to 81. We have a problem with civics and government, economics, history, and geography. And we appropriated $50,000 to do what we're doing here today. So I think we should be able to get this job done. So I just look back over a number of times I've had folks testifying in the committee here in Concord, and I hear over and over and over again what I'm learning in terms of, if we're not talking necessarily fourth grade here, but what I have heard from my son and my daughter who have gone to school, what they get as far as social studies in the fourth grade is a trip to the Capitol building, period. That's it. And so social studies, i.e. civics, government, history, government, economics, geography, been relegated to the back seat. We got to bring it to the front seat. And in order to have a society that can work together and cooperate and learn to get the job done that we need to do in this country and this state. So thank you very much, Obed. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth DeGrule. I'm from the New Hampshire Historical Society. I'm the Director of Education there. And Bill Dunlap, our president, is also here today. The New Hampshire Historical Society has made a big commitment to social studies education in the state, grades K through 12. In 2016, we started a project called the Democracy Project. We raised $1.2 million to support that. And we did a series of listening tours with teachers and educators around the state to find out really what they needed to renew social studies education. We found our findings were very similar to what Representative Ladd mentioned, that social studies had virtually disappeared from the elementary grades and was on very shaky ground in the middle school, which had a terrible rippling effect up through high school social studies. In response, we started a three-pronged effort to provide teacher training, to do more advocacy on the state level, in which has brought me working with the commissioner, and most importantly, to create curriculum resources, which I understand is the emphasis here today. We created a online resource called the Moose on the Loose, which reminds me, we'd love to borrow your moose downstairs.
He's hard to move around.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He'll go swap it for the Concord coach.
But the Moose on the Loose is an online resource and curriculum that covers state history, civics, economics, and geography. It focuses on grades 3 through 8. It is provided entirely at no cost, and it is completely open access, so anyone can get on it. We are having great success having it adopted in schools across the state. Last year we had about 30,000 people use the Moose, teachers and students, and those included public school, charter school, private school, homeschool, across the board. The Chief Justice even appeared in one of our videos, had a starring role about the New Hampshire Supreme Court. So we have made a big investment in this. It is a content-based curriculum, a balanced curriculum. Our emphasis is really on fundamental knowledge and trying to get that into the schools as a foundation so that students can then add on that as they get older and older and eventually learn to practice those skills and become fully participatory in the democratic system.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's very helpful. Welcome.
My name is Martin Honenberg. I'm a Superior Court judge. I'm here as the designee of the Chief Administrative Judge of the Superior Court, who I think is still Pianetto, although it might be Mark Howard. It's changing even as we speak. I have been involved in one of the major civics education things in the state for over 20 years in the We the People competition that is done by a very small number of high schools using the curriculum of the Center for Civic Education, which is used in many, many schools, elementary schools and secondary schools. I'm here as a representative of the Superior Court, with 3 judges here, and we have a particular perspective on how government works and how the branches interact, which is one of the essential parts of understanding how our world is governed, the separation of powers and such. There is, as with materials that exist already, there are materials that exist about national constitutional development, constitutional history principles. As soon as Secretary of State Gardner started talking, I knew he was going to get the bowling alone, because as I have judged the We the People competition over the years, I've gone to the national competition twice. There are various modules, various groups, questions you see, and one year I had a question that talked about the disconnectedness of youth and adults as they go through life. I had never heard as much as I had before then about bowling alone and the concepts that are in here, there. So it's something that I take very seriously. Hope I can contribute in some way to the efforts of the commission.
Good afternoon, my name is David King. I'm the Administrative Judge of the New Hampshire Circuit Court. Like Judge Hornberg, pretty active in a lot of legal issues that intersect. I spent the first 50 years of my life in Colebrook, up in the North Country, and I learned my New Hampshire Civics from Mrs. Wisbell, Maggie Wisbell, who had all of her own materials, all homemade materials. It was a fascinating year as an 8th grader. Mrs. Wisbell went on to spend several terms in the New Hampshire House of Representatives as one of our state reps from Colebrook. And when she decided to retire, I ran for her seat and actually had the exact same seat that she had for a year, 40 years ago in the House. So I look forward to participating in this and seeing where this goes. My former law partner, Phil Waystack from Colebrook, started a program in 1986, I think, when he was president of the bar, called Lawyer in Every School Day. And the idea was to get a lawyer or a judge from every school in New Hampshire into a school and spend the day with the kids and talk about civics. And I did that for many years. It was really rewarding. When my kids were younger, I would go in and we'd have jury trials in the 3rd and 4th grade, and it was a fascinating exercise. So thank you. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I told you I need to leave at 2:45 to go to North Country.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Moffett, I'm a state representative from Loudon. Judge King is one of my constituents. I'm also originally from the North Country. I'm currently the chair of state-federal relations and veterans affairs at the House. I spent 2 terms with Rick on House education. I used to teach civics up in the North Country and also in Manchester. Bill, Secretary Gardner, actually came to one of my classes in Manchester back in 1982 and spoke to my class. Thanks for that, Bill, appreciated it, way back then. And anyway, I've tried civics, care about it, thrilled to be here, happy this exists. I've had several bills get to the governor's desk most of which he signed. Diana Fenn just gave me some language for another bill. So I'm very happy to be here and happy this commission exists.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I'm Dominic Dubrovic. I'm the New Hampshire Civics teacher appointed by Frank Edelblut. Currently, I am teaching 6th grade at Lionheart Classical Academy. It's a charter school in Peterborough. It's my first year there, but this is my 9th year in the classroom. And I've been teaching civics and history throughout as well. So I just hope to bring in my perspective based on the failures and successes I've seen in the classroom through those years.
I'm Chuck Douglas, currently live in Pembroke and practice law here in Concord. Bill and I had the chance in the early 80s, and I gave you a copy of the background, to be involved with the commission to celebrate the bicentennial of the New Hampshire Constitution in 1984. And everyone agreed that civics was important, and just having a nice ceremony wasn't enough. We wanted to create textbooks, which we did. The state paid for them. A number of other companies did. You'll see in the materials names that no longer are even with us, like Tyco and DEC and so forth. But I kind of, after that, life went on, and then I was talking to Bill Dunlap, many conversations about the problem they were having with kids visiting the Historical Society. They had to stop with the revolution because no one knew there was one. They didn't know we had been under the crown. Bill said it's easier to start with the Civil War part of the museum because they've all heard of Lincoln. They don't know much other than they've heard of Lincoln. That was scary, and that's the genesis of the program that he fundraised, got the $1 million. Elizabeth developed material that has great content. It's on the internet, and I had the chance to read some of the chapters. But the need is acute. The bulk of what the state commission did, and the people, you can see when you read through it that it was a very wide range of teachers and lawyers and judges and people interested in making sure we have an educated population in the area of the Constitution. So the need is acute, and I appreciate the chance to help again. And Bill and I pledged to outlive each other.
Good, I'm just gonna win, put that in the minutes.
We'll skip that.
Thank you, Chuck.
I'm Ruth Ward. I represent District 8 in the Senate. There's 20 towns, a very wide-ranging population from Sunapee, Dunbarton down to Charlestown and Unity. Very interesting. I grew up with the civics. We had geography lessons, we had biology lessons, we had history lessons. I drew maps of my country, and we read books about the little guy who rode on a goose, traveling all over the country and looking at different areas and explaining what it was all about. I'm very excited to be here. This is one of the other education-related committees that I'm on, so I'm looking forward to see what we can do. Hopefully we can get this thing going and get something done for the kids because they know very little.
I'm Bailey Sweet. I am here as the parent. So my resume includes being the parent of 4. I have 2 children that are currently in a public charter school, Lionheart Classical Academy, 1st and 3rd, and then I have 2 others at home. For the last 16 years, I actually worked for the E&J Gallo Winery out in California. I called on the New Hampshire Liquor Commission, and in April, I made the decision to retire, as I called it, and decided to stay home with my 4 children. So I'm honored to be here. I hope to contribute wisdom and one perspective of one of the stakeholders involved in this product, and that being the parents, how we can support what's happening in the classroom and what's happening at home to teach children civics. So
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gordon McDonald. I serve as Chief Justice of New Hampshire. I am really honored to be here and commend the drafters of this legislation for including 3 members of the judicial branch. Civics education is a real priority for us in the judicial branch. And it's, for me personally, very front of mind in this moment. I serve on the board of directors of the Conference of Chief Justices, which is the organization of all our state and territorial chief justices. And through the National Center of State Courts, we have done a survey for each of the last 10 years on public confidence in our public institutions. And the line is down, and state precipitously. And state judiciaries, which have for many years not suffered a decline, are also down. And we are so concerned as a group that we've engaged focus groups, and literally, I just was at one earlier this week, walking out of that, I feel an even more acute urgency in understanding the importance of this work. Lack of engagement and understanding of our structure and functions of the branches and the interrelationship of state and federal government and our system of police outcomes is just astonishing. I of course hope that our work will continue to focus and promote the idea of a fair and independent judiciary is absolutely essential for our democracy and the rule of law, and the importance of all of our state constitutions as separate and independent sources of rights in a system of dual sovereigns. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Maria Manis-Pinchot, and I am representing New Hampshire Civics. I think we're very fortunate in the state. There's a number of organizations that have a lot of free curriculum for civics. It's a matter of how do we get it into the hands of the teachers in a way that they can use it. I think a lot of the challenges that teachers have expressed is the fact that how do I integrate it? How do I fit it into the schedule? How do I do this? I come from higher education. I was a professor of business for 25 years. And I can tell you, we worked with the Luna Foundation that in 2012 had done degree qualification matrix, which identified civic engagement and citizenship as a key component of every student leaving higher ed. We know that in the workplace, that is a real problem because some of the fundamental aspects of civics is effective communication, team membership, recognizing that it's okay to disagree, but in a civil manner, and all these other things that we aren't seeing today. New Hampshire Civics offers Civics 603, works with the court systems. We offer the Meet the Challenge, we have the New Hampshire State Governor, we have a curriculum library also open to the public and free of charge, and we work on advocacy.
I must say I'm humbled to be among you all. This is a very rich and diverse and talented group of people who have been assembled to serve in this role. My name is Ovid Lamontagne. I'm senior of counsel with the Bernstein Shore Law Firm. But my true love is in education. I started my career as a high school social studies teacher. I became chairman of the Diocesan School Board overseeing Catholic schools in the late 80s, and Governor Merrill appointed me chairman of the State Board of Education in 1993, where I served for 3 years. And then I now teach constitutional law at St. Nelson College. I told my students last semester, Constitution is the owner's manual of citizenship. It tells you how the government functions, where to go to solve problems. Like most owner's manuals, when people bought a car, flip through the owner's manual, you put it in the glove compartment. You don't necessarily know it word for word, but you know where to go to solve problems. It's in that owner's manual. And the Constitution of New Hampshire, which is really the focus of our work under the statute, is a critically important part of what the students need to know, and it gives rise to everything else that we do in the public square. And so I'm really pleased to be part of this group and look forward to working with you. So now,
Would I be out of bounds if we also recognize the person that's not on it?
Yes.
The man that I've worked with so closely with civics and government and legislation, Lou D'Alessandro, and he's amongst us today.
You're Bill Gardner's teacher too. Did you want to share anything, any wisdom?
All the wisdom's around the table.
We'll be calling on you if we have a gap in knowledge here. Our first formal order of business other than convening is to elect a chairperson. And so when we do that, Rick?
Thank you very much, Obed. I'd like to have the privilege of nominating you as the chair of this commission. Obed Lamontagne.
Thank you, Rick.
I'd be happy to second it. I've known Ovid for years, and the great news is he is a former State Board of Ed chair and a social studies teacher, so I think we've got the right guy.
Anyone else, any other nominations to be heard before? If not, I should call for a vote. You want to do this by secret ballot or? Okay,
One ballot.
Thank you.
All those in favor, I guess?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. I'm honored to serve, and it's probably nice to win an election. I'm glad you appreciate that. You can laugh, Terry. You can laugh.
I'll leave that
He's coughing on something.
We thought it would be appropriate now to also appoint a recording secretary. I don't know who you have in mind for the department, maybe the staff list, but for now you serve.
I can serve as
our relations coordinator, our recording secretary. So we have that. And then, in terms of overseeing or just giving a sort of big picture look of the work of our commission, we're going to need the support, obviously, of the Department of Education. Commissioner Edelblue is here to serve us, as he's indicated, and I'm just curious as to what your vision is for how we might proceed. And obviously have this interactive so that we can ask Frank, if any questions or have any ideas that, to help him, to help us in our work.
Well, and so I thought it was important to kind of lay out what we understand the charge to be, because really it's your charge, so you guys got to point us in the right direction. So I'm happy to be the secretary, but I will point out, so Melissa White is sitting back here. Melissa is a division director here at the Department of Education, in charge of the Division of Learner Support.
Is that you, Melissa?
That is Melissa, wave your hand, okay, there you go. And this work would fit into the domain of that division, is where it will take place. So if you have any questions, I'm pretty sure that my cell number is on this list, but if not, I'm gonna provide that to you. Check that first, Frank. It is not, I have an office number there, but I'm happy to share with you my cell number as well for members of the committee. And then either press them at the end of the room. 603-931-2071. And so feel free to reach out to me at any point in time if you have any questions. I thought the appropriate place to start was really, and I think you have a copy of it there, is with the statute itself. And if we would just review that, and I will flag for you some of the stuff that stood out to me relative to the work that we're supposed to do here, but again, share this in the context of hoping to get you to reflect back to me as to what you understand the nature of this work to be. And you'll see in that statute, it begins with a section of the creation of the commission and the appointment of members of that commission. All of the members have been appointed except for one. We were reaching out to a number of social studies teachers over the summer, but it wasn't that easy to get a hold of them. And so we're hoping now we've got some more invitations out that somebody will be able to accept that, and then we'll have a second social studies teacher who will be joining us. And then we get down to really the work of the Civics Commission, which is in Roman numeral 2. And I will be reading to this, but pausing as I go through there. But the commission shall create a textbook, and that's a very precise thing, and related curriculum specifically designed for New Hampshire students and teachers. And I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll interject some materials as we go through, you'll see that I came in with a pile of books. So one of the books that was referenced already is We the People. Notice I've got my whole series of my We the People, curriculum here, and so I appreciate you mentioning that. Again, a curriculum fully developed, available, used in some of the secondary programs here in the state of New Hampshire.
And elementary.
Some of the elementary,
It's used
okay.
in school districts throughout the state and throughout the country.
Great, okay. I have another contribution to this work, which dates back a little bit longer. I don't know who this is. I got this from Chuck, and it says "Love Somebody" or nothing like something. He gave me a copy of this. I was wondering who that was. So I assumed that wasn't from you to me.
I bought some on Amazon.
There we go. Okay. And this was produced in 1986. It's a 3-set volume, and it's basically the story of the New Hampshire Constitution, a New Hampshire history, and the story of the New Hampshire Constitution, but as an educator resource that has annotations and lesson plan content in it. Obviously, just given the, when it was published, it's a nice hard copy type of a resource. And quite honestly, Chuck, I have to tell you, this was fun. That one was fun to go through. Because it was, and you have to put it into context of the fact that it was developed in 1986. Now I've been through Moose on the Loose, which is also fun to go through, just to be clear.
Well, I brought some flyers.
Oh, did you? Okay, good, yes.
People can, I think I have just enough here.
Okay,
And we actually use both of those sources a great deal when we developed the Moose on the Loose.
yeah, so the Moose on the Loose isn't a textbook, but it is equally as engaging. But I have to tell you something, from a 1986 resource, this was a lot of fun to look at. There's cartoons and, content. Yeah, exactly, just stuff that would engage students. And then I know that you mentioned as well, much of your curriculum that you have, I'm not as familiar with some of that curriculum, but I stop on that because if we're not engaging the students, then we're really not gonna penetrate, right? They're not gonna get it, they're not gonna engage in the work that we're doing. So I think that the goal here is really to, whatever that create a textbook and related curriculum has as an objective to be something that the children want to pick up and want to be participating with. So, and it says it's specifically designed for New Hampshire students and teachers to help them explore, and I'm gonna pause on that as well. Specifically designed for New Hampshire students and teachers, and that as well, I think, carries with it a variety of content implications. Number one is relative to, where are New Hampshire students relative to the rest of the country, right? Like, so we've got, New Hampshire is one of the higher performing academic states, right? I know that we have our own deficiencies, we're not meeting our own expectations, but that's there. New Hampshire students are gonna come up this with a very acute perspective that may differ from Kansas in terms of its role in the founding and the constitutions and one of the original 13. And I think that and I may be reading into this, Rick, as you guys wrote this legislation and Ruth, but that I would hope that our goal there, when we say it's designed for New Hampshire students and teachers to help inculcate that concept of one of the first 13 and the whole founding cohort. To help them explore the history, heritage, and principles of the New Hampshire Constitution. So it's not just the Constitution, but it is the history of that Constitution, the heritage of that Constitution. It was interesting, in another context, I had opportunity recently to go back and look at the original version, not the adopted version, of the Declaration of Independence, that first draft of the Declaration of Independence before it went through the debate. To understand what was the content of that original draft. And I think, there's important, stuff that you can glean from that, because you understand kind of that history and heritage and principles that are being brought to the table for that civic process of getting to the Declaration of Independence, which we all know and love. So the history of the New Hampshire Constitution and the government it established. What's not included in there, and came out of a brief conversation that I had with Mr. Douglas, was, this is the New Hampshire Constitution that is specified in here. So what, and I don't know the answer to this, but what is the role? How far out do we push the bounds of that to include what is included in here? To your point, a lot of federal constitutional history and stuff like that. You know, I don't want to overreach and I don't want to overbite, but obviously a lot of these state constitutions, as they were adopted, either influence that federal constitution or those federal constitution activities influence the state constitutions. So I don't know where to draw that line, but I throw that out as a question for the committee as we go through this. And then under sub A, it says a paper copy of the published textbook shall be available for each New Hampshire Civics classroom, and an interactive version shall be made available on the Department of Education's website or in another form to all New Hampshire citizens at no charge. And so I don't know, you know, when you talk about a paper copy being available to all of the classrooms, I think, but again, I don't know the specific intent, and maybe the legislators are here can weigh in on this. The goal is not necessarily to put this volume, you know, these 2 volumes in the hands of every student in New Hampshire, but to make sure that a paper copy is available, right, so that it can be engaged, but that, you know, much of our curriculum, much of Moose on the Loose, right, is, you know, we deliver much of our curriculum these days digitally, right? And so I think it's important that we meet the obligation of a paper copy of the published textbook shall be available, but that interactive electronic version, I think, is part of the engagement and part of the delivery mechanism, because that's how our educators today would probably seek to deliver the instruction, is via some type of an electronic thing. Then we've got some timelines. The commission shall meet as often as the chair determines, that's up to Ovid, and shall publish the book on or before August 1st, 2025. I'm optimistic that we can accelerate that work and maybe we can get done a little quicker, but we'll have to see how that goes, but I hope so. But we have some runway. I mean, and almost everybody in here I know has served on a number of commissions, and you know how this work goes, right? Really slowly and then frantically, you know?
Yep.
And so we're gonna try to avoid the really slowly and frantically normal pace of how these commissions sometimes operate. You know, the commission shall, and then we're in Roman 3, just one other aspect that I want to float or highlight for you here. The members of the commission shall elect the chairperson, which we've done. We've got the first meeting happening. You know, there is hereby appropriated to the Department of Education Commission on New Hampshire Civics established under 21 NHC a sum of $1 million, much more than Rick's $50,000. For the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023, that is non-lapsing, for the purpose of creating the textbook. And so my understanding of how this will work is, and again, I'm putting this out there with the idea that you all are going to provide direction to the department in terms of the execution of this. You know, so we actually have a position that was also established in this budget to be able to support somebody. We've tried to recruit somebody before this meeting, but if you've ever tried to recruit somebody in today's environment, it's not easy. Kind of someone who would be kind of an administrative lead relative to that. And then my imagine is that we would go through some type of, you know, RFP type of a process of finding a firm and some resources external that can, you know, take the direction of this commission, because I don't imagine that, I know many of you have very busy schedules and you got a lot going on, but they would do the bulk of that work and this commission would oversee that work. You know, whether that is in planning meetings or in providing direction, reviewing drafts, providing input on those drafts and helping to guide that. I would imagine that if we go through an RFP type of a process and a vendor is selected, we would want them to not begin at ground zero. We would want them to begin with a lot of the work that you've already done, with the Moose on the Loose, with the We the People, with these books that have already been done. Like, we've got a lot of good stuff here to work with, and I hope that we can leverage that. And then the final comment that I have relative to the statute and putting it together is, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm always cautious of the build it and they will come approach to doing things, right? Like, what I don't want is I don't want textbooks that collect dust for until how many more years before we have to do another one of these commissions? You know, another 10 years? And you said that we keep doing these, right? Yes. Yeah.
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years, exactly. So the point is, whatever we do, we should keep in mind, the goal is that we're actually making progress towards the ultimate goal of inculcating you know, the principles in these resources into the students. And with that, what I want to add to it, and there's two aspects that might be a little bit controversial, but what we have to understand is, you know, part of why we are here, although it sounds like we've been here for some amount of time, is a function of the system, right? Like I've got a system that rewards math and English. I've got a system that assesses math and English. I have a system that provides substantive federal dollars relative to math and English. I have all of my, whether it's my National Assessment Governing Board or all of my other, you know, national organizations that are looking at a state and saying, how's the state doing? Nobody wants to know, you know, how we're doing in civics, you know, for the most part, but they all want to know what are your math scores, what are your English scores. So that is out there. So how do we message relative to that? Because, you know, we only have students from 7:30 to 2:30, right? And so oftentimes I've had this conversation with a number of different legislators at times, like, we have to do this. I'm like, just bear in mind, like, I got a fixed amount of time. Like, if you put something in and something else is coming out. So we have to think about what does that look like relative to these students. And I say that in the context of, you know, being creative in terms of how we engage these students, both in and out of school, I'm gonna say, right? As, you know, other places to find ways to encounter these students. And then the second thing that I will say, you know, Elizabeth, you're probably more prepared to respond to this if you wanted to, but this problem has been persistent for a long time, for decades, right? And so what I would tell you is that we have cohorts of educators, present company excluded, of course. We have cohorts of educators that are not necessarily equipped with the tools to know what a constitutional republic is and how it's supposed to function. So we're asking some people to give away what they themselves don't possess, and that can be difficult. So we have to think hard about how we make sure that, you know, we aren't just throwing something out there and imagining that people who are ill-equipped to pick it up and to run with it are able to do that. And so with that, then I'll just pause and understand kind of a reflection in terms of, you know, we want to support you as a department. I view that as our role. We're administrators for this process. You all are the commission. I mean, I am a member of the commission, so I'll weigh in, but I'm one member of a large commission, and so we really want to support you and support the effort here. And those are some of the comments that I will make.
So if I could just kind of pick up on that, I mean, you are absolutely right, and that when we spoke with teachers and educators around the state, and parents, frankly, they all agree, you know, social studies education has been in decline since the 70s and 80s, and many teachers said they were not comfortable teaching these topics because they themselves did not know them. So this is a more extensive problem. We did find, the thing we heard from administrators and over again, there's a lot of goodwill out there. Teachers want to teach this. This for them is the fun stuff to teach. If they have the resources, if they have the preparation. But the real problem is time, as you mentioned. How do you fit this in to a school day that is already packed? I think the department has already given us an in, frankly. You guys have changed, or maybe not, you have embraced a new concept of reading theory, right? Which, not to get too far into pedagogy, but emphasizes the idea that you need to have contextual knowledge to be an effective reader and to have effective reading skills. And history and civics provides that sort of cultural literacy that is the foundation of contextual knowledge. So then you can figure out a new vocabulary word from the context of what's around it because you have a sense of what's happening in the world.
Can I translate that into something really practical and then you
Yeah,
continue? And I don't mind to
yeah.
interrupt you. But what that means is that maybe there is a series of grade level readers that students have, right, that are teaching these various principles that the teacher can pick up as part of the English language arts curriculum that are simultaneously inculcating some of these principles into that.
Exactly. The danger that, which I love that idea actually, but the danger that we have to be careful is that teachers who are trying to work in still history and civics, because they don't have much time, they kind of drop it in where they can, which results in you never get any sort of sense of continuity. You never get a narrative arc. So students might be learning about World War II 1 week, and then 3 months later, they go back and they're learning about immigration in the 19th century. It's no wonder these kids are confused. Things are often not presented to them in chronological order, but teachers are trying to fit things in where they can because they don't have time. So these are all sort of big picture questions, but I think the reading piece
Could
is
be an avenue.
really the on-ramp here.
One thing I passed out is Senate Bill 216. If you could turn to the first page of that, the actual text. Senators Ward and D'Alessandro were co-sponsors. And I'm wondering, Commissioner,
Chuck, you know, I also put 216 together in that packet, and there's a lot of underlined areas within it. Did you get a hold of this right
So
here?
it's one of your handouts,
And it
everybody
has
should have a copy.
HB2 on top,
I
and then
didn't know that that
216
was-
within. So
Okay.
it might be wise just to try to trip off of that.
Good. I didn't realize that, I hadn't looked through
Yeah.
that, Mr. Chairman, but my thought is to share with you this. I did not draft this commission. Genesis was a conversation I had with the governor and Jeff Bradley about civics. The governor took the red book home one weekend to try out on his son and said, I'm sold. So then life took its course, as did 216. But I think the point I'm indirectly making is we have to recognize that there will not be a textbook for K through 12. It isn't going to work. So somehow we need to tweak it in two ways. Make it consistent with this, with 216, which means there'll be more than one textbook, but there will be money for printing. And there's nothing that I'm aware of that says how we get it done, and we're gonna need, to do RFPs and have people do some rewriting and coordination. But I don't honestly see how you do a textbook, and it would be inconsistent with the other rail that was being laid at the same time, which is 216. A half-year course, a half-year course, a one-year course. A lot of that has been invented through Elizabeth, We the People, and the books from 40 years ago. Mechanically, I'll tell you the first problem. Equity publishing is long out of business. There is no way to convert. You can't access those books. But New Hampshire Bindery can take one set and chop the cover and the spine off. And then I've located a woman in Hillsborough who has a high-speed scanner. But her problem is, she said, when you convert it to Word, it's tricky because the way that book is laid out, it was not done with Microsoft Word in mind in the early 80s. But that's something that's a mechanical thing, but I think that hopefully the money can be used to get that, so then people can take it and say, okay, here's a chapter, it's now in Word, it talks about, Secretary of State Gardner, he's no longer Secretary of State, we gotta change that. That type of thing. Just throw that out, Frank, as a major overview, because unfortunately, the two bills didn't get coordinated the way that maybe they should have.
Well, I was actually gonna ask the question about whether the department and the board have considered how to integrate both of these laws, because the very specific New Hampshire focus of this commission seems to me like a subset of the civics curriculum mandated by Senate Bill 216. If you try and think of it as not its own thing, but part of another thing, it conceptually made more sense to me, but I wanted to hear from you.
Yeah,
how
so
you
I
thought
appreciate
about it.
that. Yeah, and in fact, Chuck, I appreciate you, because I had intended to mention, because I was sort of thinking that there would be kind of a, because in 216 it talks about dedicated class time for civics in elementary school, then a half-year course for 6, 7, 8, and a half-year course of instruction in civics in high school, and a 1-year course in history, government, and constitution for the high schools. And so I was sort of thinking there was 4 categories, could be 3, could be 4 categories, because maybe that high school is a combined civics and the government at the same time. But I do think that's how we should think about these resources, and I think pedagogically that makes sense as well, because that's how the schools are going to be fitting it in, right? If we have a 6, 7, 8 resource, they're going to figure out their own scheduling and decide where they're going to plug that in. And then to your point, another piece in 216 that I had flagged, because I had also brought that with me, is it gives us some definitions to work with, right? It defines what civics is, right? And so we know kind of the frame. It says in this section, civics means, and I want to understand if this commission is okay with that definition for purposes of this work, but it means, a nonpartisan educational program that addresses, civic knowledge. You can read those on the bottom of that page, and then it flips over to D on the second page. But so I assume that would be a good definition. It's the legislature has given us a definition of physics that should frame the work that we're doing.
Can I cut in on that now?
Yeah.
When we looked at this, and we started looking at this 216, there's a portion of it on page 2, if you look at that, which is underneath 1-C. Those elements you have there, A through J, primarily A through I, we stole those. Senator Delzano and I stole those back in 2018-19 from Governor Kasich out in Ohio, and these were themes they had under civics and government that they had just written through a task force and adopted out there. And so we have these things right here. When I then asked this past month for I communicated with Linda McKean, and that letter is in that packet I gave you. It's titled July 13, 2023. I asked a number of questions of Linda, and we also had several Zoom meetings with her. And several of the areas that I've highlighted there, if you can see it, there's a page which is darker print and darker font, and then there's lighter in the letter that I wrote. And the first one, it says Ohio is a local, and I asked the question, knowing that Ohio is a local control state, how does the Ohio Department of Education determine that local school districts are meeting curricular standards? State board approved administrative rules, intent of framework guidelines, or is this left to locally designed assessment process? She responded to me, and she's the director of curriculum for the state of Ohio, in DOE there. Ohio is a local control state similar to New Hampshire, with the LEAs having responsibility for curriculum and instruction. Several years ago, the Ohio DOE had a social studies assessment in the elementary grades, levels 4 through 6. This has been discontinued. LEAs do administer the American government test in high schools. Results are not communicated to the state or to DOE. That assessment is provided through a contracted service, a testing agency. 3 courses are required for high school graduation, and they listed U.S. history, government, and world civilization. The next area that I wanted to highlight here is down there where you'll see it says, this is an Ohio DOE, I asked a question. The model curriculum introduced and now part of methods courses taught at higher education institutions. I want to know how teachers are being prepared to teach social studies. They responded, this is an Ohio DOE concern. It is not believed that Ohio's model curriculum social studies framework is utilized at higher education education departments as part of methods and teaching prep programs. Needs to occur. I have the same gut feeling as a trustee with the university system here in New Hampshire, that our teacher prep is not including the methods courses I received when I went to the university meeting years ago, and how to teach social studies and what should be incorporated within that and conveyed into the classroom. So part of our problem I think we're dealing with is that we have teachers that probably aren't familiar in how to communicate what we're trying to ask done in that curriculum. The last one on page 3 of the letter, the concern that came back, I'm saying due to this scenario, is social studies receiving less instructional commitment than those ESSA subjects? Every Student Succeeds Act, that's part of the Elementary Secondary Education Act. Are we giving as much time to this as we are language arts, reading, mathematics, science? No, we're not. Does Ohio provide local districts any guidance in terms of instructional time allocation for K through 12 social studies? This is very interesting what she responded to me with. It was communicated that social studies has been relegated to the back seat as it is not part of the ESSA and requirement of assessment. It has been communicated to Ohio DOE middle school social studies teachers. They've done a survey that students are arriving at middle school lacking social studies / government foundational skills. Middle school teachers are then placed, and I'm sure our teacher here can probably corroborate with some of this, middle school teachers are then placed in the position of teaching that which should have been taught at the elementary school level. Social studies academic standards accountability is an issue. No guidance is given to instructional time, she said. So the concern that I have, and I think that also, because I've been with Maria on this, I worked for hours and hours in the last several months with Lou D'Alessandro. And we have a task put forth in HB2 here. It's pretty specific. And it talks about civics classroom. And if you look at 216, where we have civics classrooms are in the middle school and in the high school. The rest of this is either embedded in the language arts class or taught, time permitting, in the grade schools, K through 6. So we need to, I know it's not going to be a task of this group, but we really have the responsibility saying we need to have these foundational skills on how to be a good citizen taught within the grade school. But what kind of guideline are we going to provide? So I then asked for this right here. This is the Ohio Social Studies Framework, which Governor Kasich and company DOE and that legislature approved back in 2019. They're using this now. I've taken from it on this piece of paper that you see right here, the scope and sequence, how we develop from kindergarten through grade 6, where we want to be with civics education. And this is a very simple form to follow, but we don't have this in our state, other than through the old framework, which was developed back in 2006. So that's totally outdated. It's time for us to make some kind of recommendation. Here's how you incorporate civics activities, civics instruction, whether you be a part of the 4-H program or Future Farmers of Association, FAA, or what, or work within a community event within your town you live. I think it's important for us to take a look at this and say, by the way, we feel like we have to have a scope and sequence. We recommend a scope and sequence. I'm not saying this for sure, but this is a fantastic outline that they took time to do. We don't need to go back and reinvent the wheel. And then put our emphasis where we need to put it, as Frank has alluded to. I think I'm hearing you say, Frank, that something's got to be done at the high school and possibly at the middle school. Whether if we're going to have 2 textbooks or 2 types of, it wasn't necessarily the textbooks we wrote in Maine back then. It was the teacher support materials, where you go to find it, the research materials, where are they available? Now we can put them online. But I can regurgitate where I came from. I grew up in Canada. When I moved as a 6th grader to the United States, I knew more about the state that I moved to than the people in that state knew. It was emphasized. Geography was taught in Canada. So I think we got to get our kids back so they know that Brazil is where Brazil is and Mexico's not part of Mexico.
It's not?
It's not part of Mexico, or, you know, where they say it's part of Mexico. We have some problems, and you know, I will be working myself with the New Hampshire Social Studies Association. They meet on October 20. There's a debate going on there. I'll be on that panel. I really encourage us to try and do something in regard to K through 8, but do our concentration here for the middle school going forward. And as Chuck said, I do believe we need some form of a text, something there as a guideline. When I wrote my textbook back in Maine, this is what we had for the 4th grade. It's now owned by Down East Magazine.
He keeps the old books too?
Yeah, I keep the old books. I brought my books.
Yeah.
And this is 5th and 6th, but I couldn't bring the stuff for high school because I'd be trucking all that in from Haverhill. I'd like to do a concentration in this group, trying to figure middle school through high school and getting a good strong scope and sequence recommendation for the development of civic and government skills through those grades 1 through grade 18.
Only one last point, if I could. Can we assume that Senator D'Alessandro and Rick and Senator Ward will change the word textbook to pluralize it in keeping with 216?
I think Lou tried.
Well, I think, you know, I don't want it to be that somehow we can only do grade 8, we can only do X, because the appropriation was not meant for one grade level. It's far beyond the printing cost you would need. But I'm just throwing out that let's hope a technical amendment is made next January through finance, and that we presume that it is not a book, because we're not gonna be printing anything in the next few months anyway.
Sure. So I'm okay with they wanna update the language, but I think that your understanding is easily understood in this text, because while it does say the Christian Grade 8 textbook related curriculum specifically designed for New Hampshire students and teachers, that's the plural, right?
Yeah.
And so one textbook is not gonna meet those needs, so I think I think we can easily fit
Good.
the work into the framework of that text.
But on page
without it
35, it
difficult.
says, on page 35, it also says the Commission on Hampshire Civics is hereby established to develop educational materials.
Exactly,
Which
right.
is
I think that this is
broad.
consistent.
Which is a plural.
The other thing is, and you've said it, and so has Elizabeth, if we look at where we are in the last 30, 40 years, those teachers never had civics. And they feel, it's just as everyone said, they don't know how to teach it. What we did with those books was a big statewide effort for teacher education, so they could feel comfortable. If you use this book, there's an introductory area for teachers, and this is some of the questions you're gonna have. It was to try to get them confident to go into the 4th, 8th, 11th, whatever, and be able to use the book when they haven't had any training in it. And we're gonna go through the same cycle, because you're gonna have hundreds of teachers saying, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with this thing, or how to do it, or what the sequence is, so somehow that money can't be solely for printing, because it's never gonna work.
Thank you, I agree with that, and I think Elizabeth would back me up on this. The implementation is the textbook, not an insignificant task. It's
Right.
the beginning, but that's not the work. The
No.
work is getting it inculcated into the students.
Delivered into
Exactly.
the student's head.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say right now, we finished the Moose 2 years ago, a year ago, and that is the very phase we are in right now, where we are doing in-district trainings and the Social Studies Teachers Conference, and we're talking to Plymouth State about offering courses for pre-professional teachers, and that is really where the push comes. I
And
mean,
that takes it's a
It's a
long cycle.
long
This isn't,
commitment.
you don't do it and you're done. This is a
Right.
long commitment.
Right, and you have to educate the teachers who are already in the classroom, you gotta educate the teachers who are coming up.
out.
It just goes on and on and on. So it is a big effort, but I come to the same conclusion you did, Chuck. I mean, that is where it all counts. That's where the rubber hits the road. Otherwise, that will sit on somebody's shelf and never get looked at again. So, yeah.
Yes.
So I have a question, probably totally off base. The frameworks and the standards, 2006, is there any intention of having that updated simultaneously? Or is this gonna be updated after the fact, and then you have to go back to what you've done with the textbook? I would just be concerned that a lot of effort goes forward on the textbooks, and then all of a sudden the framework changes and it doesn't align.
Yeah, so I'll respond to that in two ways. So we actually did start work on the standards before the COVID pandemic, but you know, COVID happened, and quite frankly, as an agency, you know, we've been managing an extra $650 million, right? Like, we just don't have the bandwidth to simultaneously update that work. So we're still in that, like, we still have tail that we're managing relative to those funds. So I don't see that happening, but I also, those 2006, I get that 2006 is 2006, but that's not that old compared, I mean, those aren't as old as these textbooks that we like, right? And so let's not lose sight of that. And so my hope would be that the work of this commission would be the type of standards that we expect that these students would have, right? Like, so I would hope that, you know, this work would influence the ultimate revision of those standards. Because if we were to say, like, let's put this work on hold and then go back to standards work is an 18-month process.
Okay, so now here's another question.
Okay. And so I don't know, you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to.
No, I get it. I'm coming out of left field on this one, so just be aware of it. Experiential learning is critically important, and a lot of young students do better and understand better. And the integration of civics in your language arts, in your math, in your science, it can be done.
Absolutely.
And they can learn. So is there any consideration going to be given at the same time with your textbook or whatever you're doing for the experiential learning that the kids are getting? For example, New Hampshire kids govern, right? That whole election process, all the classrooms that participate in it, are they getting credit for that? Or is it going to be saying, well, that's a one-off, or that's just an extra, just like some of the things that are done with the Moose and the Loose? So I guess what I'm asking is there going to be consideration to some alternative types of curriculum that would meet
Yeah.
and
So
support?
I'm going to try to you're speaking my language right now. So, you commingled a couple of things that I'll separate out. So you talked about you know, experiential learning, but then you talked about the integrated learning, which I want to separate those two things. So there's integrated, which you were talking about, which is really, can we create resources that can be integrated into English language arts, into things that I think is, you know, it's a more engaging way of getting the students involved, right? Like, so you just know that works. The experiential as well. Now, experiential is kind of a project-based type of learning. So this is the learning, like a kid governor, that's an experiential, but not necessarily integrated. So are you proposing that we turn this into a Learn Everywhere program? Is that what that said? Because I am all for that, right? Sorry for saying it, but I mean, that's the point we're saying. Like, can we create these types of experiences with, you know, organizations such as yourselves or organizations like at the Supreme Court, that these students can, through projects, you know, engage and learn some of this important, you know, language, because to your point, that everybody knows that is the best pedagogy, right? Like, so that is where the students will be engaged and the lessons will stick with them for life.
Right.
So I mean, this is the feedback loop, so I hear that feedback loop in that process.
And I got us off track because.
No, that's okay.
Right. Anyone else have any observations, questions based on the commissioner's presentation or this discussion we've had?
I do have a question, actually,
Sure.
for Commissioner. I don't think you can answer this right now. We've looked at a lot of different state,
Framework
thank you.
standards.
I don't know why that just blanked out of my head
Yeah.
after we spent so much time on it. And Ohio has got a great model. New York has a great model. Massachusetts has an interesting model. But I think it's important that we remember that we're dealing with New Hampshire educators and what they're used to and what they're expecting from the DOE. We traditionally do not like top-down approaches. There's no administrators on this commission. There's not anybody from the Superintendent's Association, the Principals Association, the School Board Association. I think if we want this to be accepted in good faith, I think it would be interesting to see what kind of support other subjects get. Because to me, it seems like the issue is social studies is so marginalized compared to science, English, and math. And if we can see what does New Hampshire provide to support those three subjects and bring social studies up to that, we will have an easier time getting schools to adopt it than if we are trying to bring in something that's totally different from a different state.
You know why those subjects are emphasized in reading, English, mathematics, and science? The statewide assessment.
Right.
When a school has an achievement score in mathematics of a 38 percentile for that entire school, parents and school boards, administrators are gonna jump all over it. So where are you gonna put your focus as a teacher in the classroom? Right there, get that math up. There is no assessment, and this is exactly what Linda McKean out in Ohio said too. We are a local control state. The people on the western side of that state are more interested in rural education, rural factors dealing with, the agriculture. In Toledo, it's a different game. So we've got this local control thing is something we've been dealing with in the legislature for years in terms of curriculum, because we clearly state that curriculum and instruction are a responsibility of the LEA. It's clear. And so now we want to come down and figure out why are we so weak in this subject area? And how can we improve it? I think the best thing we need to do is make a recommendation, because we're not the ones that would develop a scope and sequence of some kind, but we can certainly recommend we need that. These teachers in the middle school cannot be teaching what should have been taught in the 3rd grade and teaching how an annual town meeting works. And so I believe that we can make some recommendations here, but I don't see this commission responsible for doing any kind of a scope and sequence. That's gonna have to involve the teacher. To get ownership, you're gonna have to get into that classroom. You're gonna have to open that door and make them feel like they're part of this. And so I would like to see us recommend something, or go that direction, but really put our marbles right now. We don't have a lot of time. If you said, there's a time limit on this, let's deal with where we know we have to deal with. We have to do something. We have classes, we have a half credit course here, a half credit course there, and a full course there. Let's improve it.
So, Bill,
I
you want to say something?
two quick comments. It's really important what Mike and Rick have to say, because they've done it. And one of the most significant things that this state has had was back in the late 70s, a group of high school teachers got together and said, we've got to do something more about this Constitution. The Secretary of State is required to publish the Constitution every 2 years, and most of the articles, teachers can't even explain to the students what the words actually mean. So 2 of them, Waldo Sanders and Hal Pease, remember them?
Yep.
Chuck? They got together and they said, we'll do this. We will go through each of the 101 articles and we will prepare a student guide. So we got that funded by the legislature.
Can you bring that in for us? We should add that to the pile, right?
And for 30-some years, that was, when we published the Constitution, we had the student guide in the back of it, from the same people that had, they passed on 20 years, it still was coming out. But it worked because they cared about it. And it was a step, it was a little step, but at least it was a step. And I don't think that's published anymore because it's, but it's just outdated. I mean, you could argue that because this was written 200 and some years ago, the whole thing is outdated. But it's really not outdated.
It isn't, right.
It just,
It's
there
not
can be
understood.
new examples that have come to light
Yeah.
because of modern age, and so it's outdated not in a different way, that's all. And the teachers are gonna be the most important part of this, and that's why when you go to that meeting, I don't know if Mike's gonna go with you in October.
I don't know, were you
You
invited,
should-
Mike?
I don't have an invitation yet.
October 20th, over at Capone Center.
You should talk to them about this, see, get a feel for them, how willing and interested, because what has changed?
I think clearly, Bill, the New Hampshire Association of Social Studies is very interested in what we're doing, very interested, and want to see something done, because they understand that. I will say that I have a social studies teacher up at Woodsville High School. That's an exceptional teacher. He's written his own class on military history involving New Hampshire and all that. He brings people into the classroom that have fought in Vietnam and Korea, and even some World War II vets that are still living up there in town. And the kids are learning, and there's an expectation. And so I believe we have some good folks out there. However, I think truthfully, where we're really missing this boat is not through the trained teacher necessarily in the classroom at the high school level. It's the foundational skills are not being taught. And the foundational skills are being missed because we've gotten this thematic reading stuff where we're gonna take social studies and move it into the reading class, and you're gonna read a book about, Paulson or Gary Paulson or something else and get a little bit of understanding what the Northwoods were like. That's good, and this should be done, but it's not enough to teach the skills and the knowledge and the content of social studies which we have to be teaching.
Great. And one of the things I'll just share with you, thank you for all you've offered. It's very rich here. We have a lot of information and a lot to work with, obviously. But as your chairman, I pledge you this one thing. I will pledge one thing. We will adjourn on time. Whatever the time allotted for a meeting, we complete our work on time, okay?
7 tonight, I thought it was.
We have 15 minutes. Our agenda says 3:30. So we have a couple things I think we should try to agree on right now in the next 15 minutes. The first thing is maybe recapping a little bit what's been said. I was not aware of the interplay between House Bill or Senate Bill 216 and our House Bills 2. But I was intrigued by your comment that perhaps we should look at our work as a subset of 216. In other words, we're independent, but our focus is the New Hampshire Constitution, everything that flows from that, as opposed to the maybe larger challenge. And so the Department of Education, it seemed to me, if the commissioners would agree, should be charged with placing us in the context of your work in 216. You may already be doing that, but we should be seeing that. So we're not duplicating or even creating contrary initiatives to what is required by 216. In fact, 216 folks who are working on perhaps a larger work should be deferring to us on the issues of the New Hampshire Constitution and the civics lessons associated with it that follow, that we'll learn about. Is everybody comfortable with that, or do we want to wait till the next meeting to hear from Frank about how we're going to align House Bill 2 with the work of 216? Or are you comfortable with the fact that we're a subset, if you will, of the work of 216? Yes, so you say a subset. Okay. Everybody agree? And that doesn't mean we can't change our mind later, but at least give direction to the department.
216 came from the classroom.
Okay.
We had more people testifying. You wrote a letter, a wonderful letter, check on that. We had testimony that went and went and went on 216. It's coming from north to south, east to west in this state.
Yeah, great. So that's point one. Point two is Frank recommended that the department sort of take the lead for us and actually do hopefully hire someone to be a consultant to the department and Melissa, and work with Melissa to try to develop a plan going forward of how do we develop both content as well as the delivery system for the civics education that we hope to come from our work. Is everybody comfortable with that? We're sort of like the jury or the board of directors that's really overseeing the work of management, which is the department. Conceptually, are we comfortable with that? I mean, Rick is like, you could be the department because you're so darn knowledgeable, but in this role, you're a policy maker, right? As as the
I'm
commission.
a politician.
I know that too. But your role is more as policy overseer as opposed to the actual implementer. Now, to the extent we all have ideas and information, we send them to Frank, and he gives them to Melissa and the person who may be hired as a consultant. And we let the department take the lead, and they come back to us with recommendations about how we put this together, both in the delivery system as well as the everybody sort of comfortable with that model going forward? You
And the only thing, when we have a comment there, but I'm gonna just ask, there's been a lot of content referenced today. You referenced this other thing. I don't know if you can find a copy of that. You've got a lot of content. If that can come to us so we can kind of begin that assimilation process, I think that's valuable. Okay, but I know we're, so.
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, I think there'd be a lot of policy
Right.
appropriate for this commission embedded in, for instance, the RFP that goes out.
Yeah.
And the architecture.
Correct, you would have to approve an RFP before it's going out, I would think.
Yes.
Okay, good, yes. And that's, you.
That's how I would understand it to be. But you guys aren't gonna draft the RFP. We'll give you a draft and you guys say like, I don't like this section, I like this, or whatever it is, and then we do that process.
Can I ask a dumb lawyer's question?
Or a judge's question.
Well, I hope it would not become a judge's question, because I'm gonna ask the question. How are we gonna make sure that there's compliance with RSA 91A, the information flow, and the keeper of those records, so that if someone is interested in the work of the commission, it is compliant with RSA 91A?
Well, so I mean, we would obviously, we respond to 91 days all day long if we receive correspondence from you. If you all are corresponding when we receive a 91A inquiry, you would be responsible. We would ask you to provide any information that you have that's compliant with that 91A so that we could deliver it relative to the 91A. If I were to make a suggestion for those of you who don't live in the 91A world, a separate email account is a good way to, and separate this work in a certain place so that it's easy to access, if that's important to you. Otherwise, you may be fishing through a number of emails to get that.
That's an excellent point, thank you for raising it. Perhaps you can send us, you or your designee can send us guidance to the entire commissioners. In fact, including a reminder, if you haven't done this, to file the financial disclosure with the Secretary of State's office that the governor asked us to do, in case we haven't done that. So there's a couple housekeeping items like that, but that would be very helpful, so we know that the communications we have among each other and with the department is subject to RSA.
I mean, if you all want, I can set you up with DOE affiliate emails, if that's convenient to you. I have heard that the state technology is not that simple to work with. Some of you have been in it. I'm happy to accommodate you if somebody wants something like that, but if it's easier for you to do it another way, then that's okay as well.
Everybody comfortable with that? Okay. Now, we're gonna have to agree on a sort of a meeting schedule. So there are a few options that I'll just toss out there and we can decide as a group whether we want to take advantage of this. Is there anything that prohibits us from meeting virtually or having some commissioners participate virtually?
So you would need to have a quorum physically present. What's interesting about this statute, so the legislature did modify the statute that would allow a quorum that's not in effect yet, but I believe it comes into effect either in October or November, that you can have a third present and the rest can be virtual. But this legislation specifically states that a majority of the members of the commission shall constitute a quorum. So I think that that's how we would be bound, and I've got a bunch of judges and I think that would be the understanding of that. Like even if there's a subsequent law, I don't know if that subsequent law affects the fact that this specific commission enumerates what a quorum is. So.
Well, we do want to provide commissioners who aren't able to attend in person to do that
And
virtually.
we have that capacity here at the department.
Is everybody comfortable with that, creating that option if anyone can't participate in person? I think ideally we'd like to be together in person, but at least we'll have that.
And we may be that may mean that we send out invitations and we ask you to let us know if you'll be here in person. And if I don't have a quorum, I may call somebody and say like, hey, Elizabeth, can you show up that
We
day?
do that for the infrastructure commission. which
Exactly,
we-
we do it for there as
School
well.
infrastructure, safety, security, access, homeland security. We do it here, but it's done by Zoom as well.
Yep. Oh, we have to get a quorum there.
Yeah,
So.
The statute does not limit us to meeting here at 25 Hall Street. Is there any interest in considering the work of the commission going on the road in terms of geographical locations in the state? You raise that only because there is education opportunity for us to take this work to parts of the state where government doesn't really present itself that frequently, at least not state government. And it will give us an opportunity perhaps to have a brief open forum. If someone wants to come and talk to us about their passions or interests, they can talk about that, and then we can then conduct our regular meeting. And just raise that as an option to consider. We might do that. We don't need to decide this today, but I throw that out there.
So just so you know, probably wouldn't be able to support technology in
Right.
random
Okay.
places around the
Well, we
state.
could take it to like the PSU or Keene.
Right, technology support the
Yeah,
state.
It's possible,
Yeah.
right.
Just something to think about, and unless somebody really wants to move forward and to say that our next meeting should be in Colebrook. And
He's already left.
Yeah, I know.
We'd have to adjourn
That's why I said
early.
it. Yes, advantage. Then the question is the frequency of our meetings and the date and time. How often do you think we should meet? And perhaps we'll yield to Frank in terms of how long it will take him to come up with a material that he would want to present to us, like an RFP or other materials he would want to start to present to us. How often do you think we should meet?
So I would actually ask that we postpone that, and what I'll do is I'll get with Melissa, and I would think at the next meeting, based on the input, right, because this is the first time I've had a chance to meet with everybody, so to kind of get your all's perspective in terms of how we're gonna tackle this. So let us put together a framework for this project, and I think at the next meeting, then you all can look at that framework, provide input to that, like in that framework will hopefully reflect the feedback that I've gotten from you all. And I think that will dictate, you know, kind of the frequency and the pace and everything else. And so there may be sometimes when it's more accelerated and sometimes when it's more elongated.
So how long do you need for that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go to the call of the chair, so let me get together with
Okay.
Melissa, I'm not gonna commit now,
Okay.
and,
Great.
you know, to something that I can or can't deliver. So we'll figure that out, and
Okay.
we'll let you know, and you can then, and we will continue to correspond out to the commission in terms of the meeting.
Okay.
The next
So-
meeting.
I'm assuming that, Frank, you'll have minutes and an agenda that'll come electronically.
Correct.
So if somebody replies all, if somebody has like a
Please
great,
don't do that.
Yeah.
right, so that's the 91A thing. So once we get, will you send it BCC or to all of us?
So no, I'm able to send that correspondence out to you, and that doesn't constitute a quorum for the meeting, but if you begin to reply, and then now we've instituted dialogue among the parties of the commission. You wanna comment, you wanna respond to that, or am I doing okay?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yes, I don't wanna, you don't reply all, because now you're creating correspondence relative to the thing, and then somebody else replies all. That's, and that, we would, if I see that happening, that we will ask people to not do that. You know, because then we haven't got an official we're conducting business because we're more than a quorum are on that email chain, but we're not officially, you know, open for business because we haven't posted a meeting and everything else. So I think everybody here is familiar with those processes, and we don't do reply all.
Chief?
Do you wanna add, weigh in on that?
Well, I would just perhaps make the suggestion, when I was Attorney General, I know when bodies like this were formed, we would provide briefing to the body about the do's and don'ts and
We can do that at the next meeting.
how to
Happy do
comply
that.
with RC Chapter 91A, because we've got an obligation to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. So at the next meeting, we will provide specific training relative to that.
So if we have a person that comes to, and they oftentimes do, go to the LOB, Legislative Office Building, say, I'd like to get the minutes, I would like to see those minutes of the last commission meeting. We've had that occur with the public school infrastructure. They're all over here, the minutes. So should we, because this is HB 2, so it's a legislative deal, are the minutes kept there, are the minutes kept here? How does that work?
So typically, we have the minutes, and when we receive a right to know request, we provide them to them.
So if we receive it,
Send it to you.
it goes to you.
The right to know request. Yeah, we would, because we actually have an entire system at the agency that we log all incoming right to know requests, and then we resolve them and respond to them and stuff like that.
Last question, is Wednesday 2 o'clock a good date and time for a meeting, knowing that schedules might change, but does anybody have a real heartburn with trying to meet on Wednesday
Well,
at 2?
when session starts, we have caucus on Wednesday afternoon starting at 1, so.
Okay,
Got it.
right. At least until the session starts, we Wednesday, 2 o'clock
January.
generally? Okay. Very good. Anything else to come?
Just, it's, the commissioner is preparing materials for us. I think it'd be helpful to get sort of, let's see, back of the envelope, but a rough idea of how $1 million might be spent in terms of getting a budget together for the commission. And so we can think about, for instance, how much to allocate to the RFP,
Yeah.
how much for materials preparation and
Yeah.
stuff.
That may, I mean, until I get this framework developed and I get green light on framework, then I probably will put price tags on the framework as well, so.
But it's, at some point,
Exactly.
certainly conceptualize.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your attendance and participation. I'm really looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the
Thank
day.
you all.
Move to adjourn?
Second.